Back in the early 90s, the PC demo scene was starting to heat up. And when I'd show these demos to my friends and family, one of the more common questions I'd get asked is, why don't these demo coders make games instead? And well, the answer is, sometimes they did. One such example is Zone 66, a very visually impressive game for 1993. This is one of the first PC games to actually look as good as an arcade machine of the era. Well, some of the same guys came back together in 1995 and created Xixit. It's more or less a clone of a game that came out a few years earlier, known as Columns, as you can see here. In fact, Columns was on at least a dozen different platforms, but lacked an MS-DOS version. So Xixit came along to fill that gap, and it was actually considerably more impressive in terms of graphics and sound, which made it more enjoyable to play. Xixit employed plasma fields and fire effects and the like, which were commonly used in demos of the time. And the music was a mod tracker type playback system mixed in real time, which was very uncommon for DOS games, which usually used the ad-lib chip instead. Well, I'd been looking to make another game for the Commander X16, and unlike Petsky Robots, I wanted to make something that had a quick and easy, fast learning curve, something that people could just pick up and learn how to play real quickly without having to read the manual. And so I had been looking at Xixit for a while as a possible candidate, and even though the original game requires like a 486 CPU, I was pretty sure I could pull this off on our little 8 MHz 6502 system. Also, my friend Jim Leonard put me in contact with the original programmer and musician, and they said it was okay to make a port. One interesting thing about Xixit is that it used a rather unusual screen resolution. Most VGA games of the era ran in the standard 320 by 200 mode, but Xixit actually ran in 320 by 240, which, lucky for me, is the native resolution of the X16. So the first thing I did was grabbed a bunch of screenshots of the game and brought them into PaintShop Pro. I had to reduce these down to 16 colors, and although the X16 does have a 256 color mode, it comes with a lot of disadvantages, and I felt that 16 colors would work better for the video RAM layout and multiple layers. I ended up actually just redrawing a lot of the assets by hand to match their DOS counterparts the best I could. I also had to recreate the Xixit font by hand. I used my own PetDraw program for that on the Commodore 64 since it can edit the font and save it. Of course, due to the way the X16's graphics layers work, I can still actually have more than 16 colors on screen, and that's because each layer can have its own palette. And then there's the sprites. I'm using 65 sprites for the playfield, so each position has a dedicated sprite, and all I needed to do was turn the sprites on or off to show whatever shape I wanted to show. I'm also using 3 more sprites to show the next piece, and 3 more for the falling blocks, so a total of 71 sprites. And the good news is each sprite can have its own palette as well. So how many colors are actually being shown? Well, as an example, if you look at this screenshot in PaintShop Pro and ask it to count colors, it will tell me there are 84 colors being used, so quite a bit more than 16. Let's talk about some other challenges. So in the DOS version, when you make a match, the shapes turn into little white dots and go flying around. Now, not to say that I couldn't do this, but it would be going to a lot of extra work, and I wasn't sure I had enough leftover sprites to accommodate all situations. So I decided to go another route, and as you can see in my version, the pieces have a self-contained explosion. Now, one little piece of trivia, I needed an animated explosion that was 16 by 16 pixels wide. So I grabbed the artwork from the Planet X3 tile set, and so anytime you see a little explosion in Planet X3, that's the same explosion in Xixit, so that's a neat little tie-in. So, what about the music? Well, the original music was a 4-track screen tracker file, which is very similar to an Amiga mod tracker file. Only on DOS machines, they had to be mixed in real time by the CPU because the sound card only had 2 channels. Actually, some of the songs used 6 voices. The X16 also has the same 2-channel style digital output as a Sound Blaster would have. The trouble is, nobody has yet created any sort of mod tracker player for the X16, and I'm not even sure if we have enough horsepower to do it, especially as a background task. So we needed to convert the music over to the Yamaha FM chip. We have some amazing musicians in the X16 community, and Nico1690 took on the job of converting the music. So he just opened the Screen Tracker file and Furnace at the same time and transposed the tunes over note by note. Of course, it's not quite that simple. For example, he had to attempt to create sounds on the FM chip to closely match the digital samples of the screen tracker file. And he did a really amazing job. In fact, listen to this clip back to back. Here's the original. And here is the X16 version. As a programmer, two of the biggest challenges were getting the scanning routine working and doing the plasma fields. Now, keep in mind that I'm writing all of this in 6502 assembly language. The way the scanning works is each time a block hits the bottom, it will scan horizontally across each row like this, looking for any matches of 3 or more. Now, if it finds any, it'll make a note of the matches, but doesn't change anything yet. And then it performs a vertical scan like this, again, looking for matches and marking them. And then a third scan, which is diagonal. And then a fourth scan, which is diagonal the other direction. Once it's finished, it'll explode any of the tiles that were marked, and then drop down any pieces to fill the gaps. But then it will run the routine again, because as you can see, sometimes there are chain reactions, so the scanning routine keeps running until no more matches are found. Okay, so the plasma. Yeah, I brainstormed over this for a while and just could not figure out how to do it. Especially with the resources I have, keeping in mind the original game ran on a machine with probably 30 or 40 times the processing power. And I think most of it was written in C. So I kind of cheated. I simply took a screenshot of some plasma and down converted it to 16 colors, or really 16 shades of gray. And so all I needed to do was modify the 16 color palette and cycle through whatever colors I wanted. The effect looks pretty good, or at least I think it does. The shape doesn't change like in the DOS version, but honestly, most of the time you're focused on the pieces in the playing field anyway. Of course, once I decided to go with color palette cycling, that opened up some other ideas for me, so I implemented some of my own backgrounds, such as this one. And heck, I even have one where it's snowing. And yes, this is color cycling too. You see, if you look at the original art, I just had to carefully place each bit of snow in the correct color, and then write the software accordingly. And you can actually see here, for example, if I play with the palette, you can actually have no snow at all, or light up a single section of the snow. It's an old trick, but it works well here. Of course, in the original version, you did have the option to disable the animation. In fact, some of my beta testers said they found the animation distracting. But in the original version, if you disable animation, you're left with this static background of green pieces for every level. Honestly, I find this to be distracting, so what I did was created some unique static backgrounds like this. And then, when you level up, you'll get a new static background. So I think that worked out really well as an enhancement. And now I just want to show you a few other changes I made to the game. This is the instruction screen. I went ahead and embedded it into the main screen like this. In the original DOS game, there was a dedicated screen for this, so I did it this way mostly to save RAM so that I didn't need to store a third graphical screen for instructions. I also changed the block sets. So in the original game, you had crystals, sparklies, wild, faces, and blobs. And the big problem was sparklies was animated. Not to say that I couldn't do this, but it was going to be a lot of work trying to draw all of those animation frames by hand, so I left that one out. So in my version, you get crystals, faces, blobs, wild, and a new one called 8-bit. So just to show you what some of these look like, here's blobs, here's wild, here's faces, and here's 8-bit. And the last change I made to the game had to do with music. In the original DOS game, you could pick your musical selection in the main menu, and then you were stuck hearing that same music over and over again. So in my version, you get a random song when you start the game, and then the song will change every 2 levels, so you get some variety. And well, that's it. I just wanted to show some of the work that goes into porting a game like this, and you might be surprised. It only took me about 4 weeks to port this game, and a lot of people might be surprised by that and be asking, well, gee, why did it take a year to make Planet X3 and 6 months to make at least the original Petsky robots for the Pet? And the reason boils down to a number of factors, and probably one of the biggest factors is just the simplicity of Xixit. I mean, the game rules are fairly simple. Petsky Robots is an amazingly complex game, as the player can choose to do one of 1,000 different things. Heck, I think I spent probably a week just designing a single map for the game, and the current version has like 16 maps. So I often tell people who are learning to code to start off with a smaller project, something like this, before they move on to something more complex. And so that's really it. I'm not selling this game or anything like that. I just wanted another launch title for the Commander X16, which, by the way, we're actually in the middle of producing the first batch of those right now, and there will be a follow-up video on that pretty soon, showing you how we're doing that. And if you want to play around with this game, you can always download the Commander X16 emulator, and I'll put a link down in the description where you can download the game for free. Oh, and one more thing. I sent a video clip over of the game running to Tran, the original programmer of Xixit, and he actually replied just today and said that he was actually impressed with how similar it looks to the original version. So that's pretty cool. But that's it for this episode. So as always, thanks for watching.